I remember this night very vividly. So I was working. I was just like in this pain. So I was like, I'm just gonna work out. It's late at night. It was storming. It was raining. Like in my backyard, it has like a metal awning, so you have like that tink tink noise that hit
Yeah.
rain off the metal type noise. So I was working out and just it just something just told me just to walk out. Right. So I walked down in the rain. And I just knelt, like fell to my knees and just screamed, just tell me my purpose. And at that point, I felt like life was just kicking me on the ground. Like I've lost so much. I've been through so much pain that, that's where I felt. But when screamed that, I felt this fire that I've never felt before. Like, mind you, like I've been through 5 years overseas. Like I've been through some tough stuff, but I felt this fire I've never felt before. So I got up and, screamed like after everything I've been through, after everything I've lost, after every woman I've loved left, you can't beat me. And in the distance, lightning went off. Like I can see the flash. It wasn't like crazy, like a flash, but it was a flash I noticed, sort of majestic, I guess you would say. So I went in, tried myself off, grabbed the bottle of whiskey, and I wrote my book for 2 days.
Battle Line podcast. We have a 101st Airborne Infantry vet on for this episode, Juan Espinoza. Excited to speak with him and get into his book, which a lot of you will like. It's definitely different than a lot of military memoirs that we've had on before, a lot of military authors you've heard on the show. Very introspective book. Before we get into him, and I'll get into some other stuff, Bubs Naturals. If you listen to the show regularly, you know that both Chris and I are longtime supporters, longtime users of all the supplements put out by Bubs Naturals, the best collagen protein peptides on the market. I use those all the time post-workout recovery, shake it up with some water. Definitely great when you want to get some protein in your system, but something that isn't super filling. And also, you're not regularly getting collagen in your diet. And I know I'm getting the best protein with them because it's single sourced, it's grass fed protein from grass fed cows. And then I also love Hydrate or Die. My personal favorite is the lemon flavor. That's my favorite, but check all of it out. And everything that you get from them benefits the Glenn Doherty Memorial Foundation, where they donate proceeds to the Glenn Doherty Memorial Foundation. A huge chunk of that proceeds. They're not just a company that does a little bit of charity here and there. They really put their money where their mouth is. We love Sean Lake. We love what they do. So check them out. BubsNaturals.com. Use the promo code BattleLine. You'll get 20% off your first purchase of all the great supplements that I mentioned. The link for that is in the description. Bubs Naturals, promo code BattleLine for 20% off. Let's go.
From Kansas City to New York City, from planet Earth to extraterrestrial life in space, a podcast with no equal, engaged in unconventional warfare through your speakers and headphones. This is a show about embracing the suck, conquering your demons, and finding God in the face of adversity. Chris Tonto Peranto.
Switch is on. Motherfucker, I'm gonna shoot you in the face.
Ian Scotto.
Ian and I have been dating for a long time.
You are now tuned into the Battle Line Podcast.
The Switch is on, Battle Line Podcast. As I mentioned, we have Juan Espinoza coming up. Figured to get into a couple of things here, though, before we get to the interview. Chris is out speaking engagement. You guys regularly know that he does a lot of those throughout the year. Not as many as he used to, but every now and again a speaking engagement does come up. and I just do the show hosting solo. And hopefully you don't mind. If you're listening or you're watching right now, I guess you do not mind. And look, I love doing the show with Chris, but I also like doing these every now and again with whoever we bring on. Last week's episode, I ruffled a few feathers. I really did, which was expected. So here's the thing. Anybody who I think listened to that full podcast or watched that full podcast got where I'm coming from. You're always going to go for a clickbaity headline, I think, just as a good podcaster. But I truly feel, man, a lot of you guys who watch the media, like regular corporate media, are used to someone who is just in one camp or another, and that they are in this team and they want to do whatever they can to support their candidate, their party. And I never play into any of that, because the fact is, whether you're watching MSNBC or you're watching Newsmax, you're getting your news, so many people, from people who are paid by super PACs. So they basically have to speak positively about all things that their candidate or their party is doing. And to me, that gets really old and it's inauthentic. And if Trump is doing something that I like, of which there's a lot, I'm going to speak about it. If he's doing things that I don't like, I'm going to speak about that too. Because I'm not paid by any super PAC, nor do I want to be, nor is Chris. And Chris and I have always been in agreement on that type of thing. Even when we're not in agreement on a particular issue, we're both two different individuals. But it's like, I don't give a fuck about being invited to Mar-a-Lago to meet with the president, as like so many people you see on Instagram. I'm not applying for a press pass. So I'm going to criticize whoever I want to and give my take and be honest about it. You know, just like you never see people on MSNBC calling out Biden when he was president, or Kamala, because it's like, oh, what if I'm not invited to the White House Correspondents' Dinner because I called them out on something? I don't care about any of that shit. And I think it's all about being authentic. You know, I mentioned Michael Savage on last week's podcast, who was in agreement with me about this Gaza issue. And he's been tweeting about it pretty actively. And I retweeted some of that at Battleline Pod on X. And, you know, for one, Michael Savage, Jewish American supporter of Israel. But I've always loved the fact that Savage is not someone who just goes in line with the party or one particular ideology, and I've always respected that. Like, I remember when Michael Savage had on Chuck Schumer, and it was like, I'm not having him on as a punching bag because we disagree on maybe 95% of things, but it was because at the time, Dubai was buying out these ports in the United States. And it was like, all right, we see eye to eye on this. We don't like this. So let's get together. Let's bond together over this and do something about it and get Democrats and Republicans alike to oppose this. And truthfully, we need more of that. That's the only way you're really going to get good ideas, good legislation passed, is Democrats and Republicans who may not be in alignment on certain things coming together on certain issues and saying, this makes sense. So I've always felt that way. Both sides need to work together when you could find common ground on things. And I think you also always need to hold anyone who's in office, hold their feet to the fire when they're doing something that's not in alignment with your values. And that's how it is. And I also don't care if people are like, I'm going to unfollow you because you said something I don't like. I mean, existing at all times in your own echo chamber like that, I think is like why we're in the position that we're in, why the country is so divided. I don't think we should all be in our own echo chamber, but that's the work of social media, right? That's where we're at. And that's also like 24/7 TV news, that if you're a Republican, you get turn on Newsmax and they're going to say everything you're going to agree with. Or if you're a liberal, you can turn on MSNBC and you're not going to hear any opposing voices and you get to live in that echo chamber. Not good for anybody. That's the bottom line on that. You know what else I wanted to mention? Was I know I'm late on this. I know I'm late on talking about the Super Bowl stuff, and there was so much like culture war ideology, I guess, about Kendrick Lamar playing the halftime show. I'm never someone who gets like outraged by anything. I'm not that guy. At the same time, anyone who's going to tell me like that was a great halftime show for what the NFL is supposed to be, which is supposed to be everyone from like your 5-year-old son to a 80-year-old grandmother. They're all supposed to be able to enjoy this, and it's supposed to speak to all Americans. And somehow this guy does a song that I feel like if people don't know the meaning of, you go, there is no way that this appeals to the majority of Americans, and is an extremely like race baiting song. And it was funny because I saw Tommy Lahren on X, who quite honestly, I feel like never researches anything she speaks on, like never has any great insight into anything. This is my honest take. And I saw this tweet where it was, conservatives, please don't clutch your pearls at the halftime show. We endured Beyonce saluting the Black Panthers and Gaga pushing the Rainbow Mafia. This was head and shoulders above that. Some might not like rap, but I'll take it. And it's like, do you not realize that this song was just as race baiting as anything you've ever heard? When he does the song, They Not Like Us, about Drake. What do you think that song is about beyond just being a diss to Drake? They Not Like Us, right? And by the way, I have to play the clip of Alex Jones doing his take on They Not Like Us because it was amazing.
They not like us. They not like us. They not like us. They're pedophiles. They rape kids. They're evil. They want to hurt you. They not like us. They not like us. They not like us. That's what I've been saying. They not like us. We know you're evil, globalists. Telling the public, they not like us. 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 Klaus Schwab not like us. King Charles not like us. Barack Obama, they are not like us. And there's double meaning to that. They not like us. They don't like us, and they're not like us.
But the they in they is people who aren't black, and then the us are people who are fully black. It's basically a shot at Drake for being a half Ashkenazi Jew who is also half black. And it was like, you're not one of us. And that's why the whole halftime show was only black people. And this is somehow supposed to appeal to all Americans. So next year at the Super Bowl, I'm going to perform my song about how if your skin color is darker than mine, you're not like me, and you are an inferior human being. And man, I would love if Media Matters somehow clipped that and was like, military podcast host Ian Scotto says that black people are inferior if they don't get the full context of that. I would know I made it if I wound up on Media Matters, which Chris has. Chris has made it. I haven't made it yet. Anyway, that was my take on that. I think when people talk about the culture wars stuff or give their take on stuff, you should at least know what you're talking about. It's as simple as that. And then when I read that stuff from Tommy Lahren, like, because personally, I'm not clutching my pearls. I don't give a shit. But does this appeal to all Americans? No. And it's like year after year, it just gets worse and worse. And if I was through the halftime show, that is not who you book, man. Not the venue. Not the right venue for it. Do whatever song that you want. That's not a Super Bowl esque performance at all. That was my take on it. So yeah, I know I'm late on giving my take on that issue, but I wanted to, and I get to host this podcast, so that's what I'm going to do. Before we get to Juan Espinoza, Fort Scott Munitions is a manufacturer of multi-federal patented solid copper and brass CNC spun ammunition. It's designed to tumble upon impact in soft tissue, leaving devastating wound channels for faster bleed out and quicker incapacitation. This ammo was originally developed to innovate and improve on the standard of military-grade ammunition design. It was found that not only did the TUI ammunition outperform competitors in the self-defense industry, but it quickly became apparent that it would be a top contender for hunters alike. With the ammunition being CNC spun, the tolerances are some of the tightest on the market, ensuring that you receive the same results with every pull of the trigger. FSM ammo is available throughout every state, but you're going to get the best deal through us. When you go to FSM.com, you use the promo code BATTLELINE, and you'll get 15% off your purchase. The link to that is in the description, but it's pretty simple to remember. It's just FSM.com, offer code BATTLELINE, one word. If you're a shooter, if you're a hunter, it's the best ammo out there. Fort Scott Munitions is a proud supporter of Chris Peranto, Battleline Tactical, and the Battleline Podcast. As for night vision, we have the greatest night vision sponsor out there, and if you're in the market for high-end quality night vision that's going to last you a lifetime, Go nowhere else but Photonis. Now you can have the superpower to see in the dark with the Viper Binocular Night Vision System by Photonis Defense. They're the global leader in night vision solutions, providing more high-quality night vision capabilities than anyone. Military, law enforcement, and public safety end users utilize Photonis Defense solutions to give them the edge at night in tactical situations and rescue operations. Hunters, shooters, boaters, and enthusiasts can rely on the Photonis Defense Viper Binocular to become masters of darkness. The new Viper Binocular system carries the same features and benefits as the Photonis Defense Viper Monocular, with a ruggedized body, and harnesses the power of the Echo Intensifier tubes, giving you sharper images, reduced halo, and industry-leading ultra-fast auto-gating across the range of dynamic operating conditions. Visit PhotonisDefense.com for more information, or look for Photonis Defense product options from your night vision dealer. With that, let's get over to Juan Espinoza. Really excited to have Juan Espinoza with me, active duty Army with combat deployments, author of this book, Unbroken, Turning Pain into Purpose, self-published book. You reached out to me, and I got a chance to check out some of this. And yeah, it's great to have you on. The first thing that I said before I even hit record, I was like, this guy looks a little bit different. I think it's because of like the beard gains. The beard is bigger.
So glad to be here. Definitely the beard is bigger, definitely for sure. But that picture, I took that picture personally. Like I have a hobby, just like taking, photography pictures. I like photography, so I did that on the side. I was like, I'm just gonna figure out like what's going on here. So I just practice, and that actual picture I probably took probably about actually more like 4 months ago.
It's appropriate too, because it's very like, if you look at the cover, it's a very kind of neutral expression, which I think goes into the book because of like the highs, the lows of your life, being very vulnerable about all of it. I actually think it kind of fits all of that.
Exactly. I think it fit like so when I was thinking of doing a cover for my book, I was like, what should I put? And then I saw that picture, I was like, that fits perfectly. So
Yeah.
I'm using that picture.
With the title Unbroken, the first thing I think of as just a music nerd, are you a Pantera fan at all?
I've heard a few of their songs, but I can't really say I'm like a huge fan because if you ask me like what's a Pantera song, it's like, I remember
You know,
like
there's a
doing it.
song called Unbroken. That's why I ask.
No, like I have no idea. I remember Avenged Sevenfold doing a Pantera riff for one of their songs. So I was like, okay, like, so I can't really say I'm like a huge fan because I really don't know. But if they
Yeah,
have it
the
unbroken,
hook of the song is like Unbroken. So I saw that. I think right away of Pantera when I just see the title.
honestly, I probably have to listen to it. Like, I probably when we get off this podcast, I'm probably gonna listen to it.
You should. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it fits with the book. But so getting into the book itself, man, I actually would say this book is a combination of several things just from reading some of it to me, in that it is a memoir, it is a military nonfiction book. At the same time, how you have these parts where you go into the reflective pauses, where it's kind of you looking back on yourself as someone who's done a little bit of therapy, as someone who's even read psychology books. Like I read Colors of the Mind by Freya Mortensen last year. She does a little bit of that in her book. It's kind of a combination of several things. It is not your typical military memoir.
Exactly. So for me, it's you have like when you go to like marketing, right? You got if you speak to all, you speak to none. You
True.
probably hear that, right?
Yeah.
But I think for me, I think my story is a little different because when I wrote my book, I also wanted the readers to reflect not just on my story, but their story alone, right? So that's why I throw those soft pauses in there like quite often to make the readers think like, okay, well, yeah, this is his story, but how can those lessons reflect to my own story? So I definitely threw those reflective pauses to make the readers understand that it's a memoir, yeah, but also it's like a self-help because I'm asking you things that are troubling and that hurt because I want to help you as well as, through my story, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it seems like you've done a lot of self reflection through the stuff that you've seen in combat, through relationship issues, through marriage and children and all that stuff. Did you go to a therapist or anything that inspired you to write this? Because you just seem like a guy who's well balanced after handling a lot of trauma.
So actually with therapy alone, right? So I want to go to my background of like I'm Hispanic, right? A lot of ethnic groups, we don't look at therapy as an option. You just like, you don't cry, you don't reflect on things, you just like tough it out and move on, right? So I went to a therapist for like one time. I did one session and I didn't like it at all because I don't know, maybe it was a therapist, I guess you would say. But it was more just like, okay, tell me like what's wrong with you? It's like, well, I don't know anything about you. So why am I gonna, tell you all the pains I have if I have no idea what you're coming from? So for me, like I went to one therapy session. That's it, honestly. When I wrote my book, it felt like 100 therapy sessions in like 2 days. So I can't really say I went through therapy or I saw people because I didn't. I just faced the pain, I guess you would say.
See, the reason that's surprising is because the book seems very inspired by that. And just as I said, those reflexive pauses, to me, it seems like textbook therapy type book.
Yeah, so it's really there's no therapy in it, and I've got a lot of people that ask like, "Did you see a therapist? Like, who'd you see? Like, what you do? What kind of self help did you do?" I was like, "I really didn't do anything. I basically just looked at my pain and just like faced the mirror, so to speak." And so I wanted the readers to understand, like, not necessarily like in my book, but now I throw it in context where I didn't see any help. I literally just faced it, and I saw the lessons behind it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you served in the 101st Airborne Infantry. You talk about a lot of that in the book and a lot of your personal life as well as what you did in training, all that type of stuff. I know that in the book you say uh you didn't have the journey that some have of where it's like I need to do this or either that or I want to go through college. Like you just kind of knew this is what worked for you. You speak about how your parents kind of took it and not the most positive not the most positive response to you making that choice. Yeah, whatever you want to get into from that for the listeners, because I think we as you kind of know, we speak to so many military veterans, and everybody has their own story of what inspired that origin story and what they got out of it, what they got out of training, combat. So yeah, I'd love for you to get into all that.
Yeah. So definitely. So for my book, like I have a lot more stories I can throw into there. But reality is, I'm never big on war stories. I'm that's just me. How I am as a person. Like I don't go into like in deep in war stories. Like I have like the book is more like a summary. I have like a lot. I can make this book, 300-400 pages long easily.
Yeah, it's
But
a short read. It is.
exactly. So I wanted the readers to understand that it's not, so for my book, it's not, um, it wasn't just like a memoir. It was more just like, I wanted the readers to understand like you can read this in like 2 or 3 days easy and start applying the lessons I've learned the hard way. So that's why I basically threw some impactful stories in there. So with my childhood, it wasn't bad at all. We weren't rich, we weren't poor. We're like, in between, so I can't say my childhood was bad, but the reality is when I grew up, I was just very that wild kid and very reckless, right? So I didn't pay attention to grades. I didn't really focus on that too much. So when I came, 18, I was like either, you try to go to college, but granted, I was uh I was reckless, so I didn't really pay too much attention on grades. And on the flip side, like my family didn't have a lot of money to send me to school, so it's either a 9 to 5 or the military. The 9 to 5, I don't know, killed me. I was like, I'm not doing that. To me, that's very like mundane, I guess you
Yeah.
would say. So I felt like I had a higher purpose. So military, what it was, and through that, I realized, I joined in 2009. So when I signed up, it was literally the day after I graduated. Actually, the day after I turned 18, to be more specific. So I went to basic training probably about 3 months later or so about September 2009 or so. And then I got to my unit in January. So I finished basic training probably around December. We had like a 2 week, you know, leave to like, holidays, Christmas, stuff like that. And then I went to my unit. And then after that, I got to my unit in January. And it was April, we went overseas. So 2010, around that time, that's the war was like raging, right?
Yeah,
You don't know exactly what you're getting into. So that's exactly like how I went into it. I did some training, but a lot of it was just like, we're here, learn as you go. So that's basically like how I was introduced to the military. My family wasn't a huge fan of it. I was the first generation of my family. So a lot of my family members didn't really like that decision, but they really respected that decision at the end. You know what I mean?
for sure. Yeah, and do you want to get into some of the basic training stuff and all that that you get into in the book?
Yeah. So basically, basic training was a more of like a shock and awe, I guess you would say. So when I went into it, it was around this time frame where I wasn't introduced to the whole yelling, the screaming, you know around this time frame. They can actually put hands on you versus later on that they can't really do that. But
Yeah,
so
Chris has talked about that on the show before. Sure.
yeah, so definitely, so it came to where it pushed my limits before or beyond what I could imagine. I had people. So I remember when we got off the bus, they're yelling, and we got to this hill. You have to like climb with all of your gear on. So I'm a small guy, so I won't lie. So when you put weight on me, I sink immediately. So when I caught this hill, like people
How
are
tall
quit.
are you?
So I'm about 5'8". I'm about 145
Oh,
pounds.
okay.
Uh,
That's like average. Yeah.
yeah, so I'm not big, but I'm not crazy small, I guess you would say. So when we climbed this hill, we had people that would quit before I got to the hill. So I was like, damn, like these guys are way bigger than me, and they're quitting. So I was like, what gives, right? So when we get into basic training, they're yelling, you're staying awake. When I mentioned the book where I was at parade rest for hours on end, which I felt like was a lifetime. But to me, coming from California, we don't see humidity as like a thing, right? I don't know. I don't know if that is. So when I go to Atlanta, Georgia, or Fort Benning, Georgia, you see like fog on the window. I'm like, what is that? Right? The weight is just crazy. So just getting introduced to all that stuff like head on, to me, it was just like a shock and awe factor. But I think you pushed beyond what you thought was capable.
Yeah.
So I learned that in basic training, and then when I go to my first deployment, it definitely ingrained in me like our bodies and our minds are more capable than when we know. We just have to see that in perspective.
Yeah, whenever I have guys on who talk about this, like the thing that seems to be repeated again and again is just like that mental toughness aspect. That it's not always the guy who looks like the most fit that you're going to say this is going to be a breeze for. It's just like the guy who has the mentality of they're never going to tap out.
Exactly. I think that's the big thing I've noticed with, my deployments and, basic training is, right. You have a lot of the guys that are really like jacked, right? They're super buff. Like, these
Yeah.
guys are going to make it. But I've seen those guys fail under pressure. I've seen guys piss themselves like in combat, which you don't think
Literally,
they
right?
literally. So it's like, for me, it's like, it's not necessarily your physical dominance, but it's more your mental strength that you have. So witnessing that firsthand, it's like, okay, to me, it threw like a different perspective, like who I was and how much strength I have, like mentally versus physically.
And then, as I said, the book gets into a lot of relationship issues and parenting and all that stuff. Do you want to get into some of that?
Oh, of course. So when it comes to parenting, right? So when I grew up, like my mom, which it's my mom, but she's my stepmom if you want to go like biologically wise. So my stepmom raised me since I was 3, and my biological mom left. So when it comes to like being a parent, a lot of what I ingrained as being a parent is through my dad and my stepmom, because she was there, she was present, she was there to, handle the goods and the bads, versus my biological mom like left, right? So I think that's a big part of just learning. It's, I blame myself a lot of the times through, you know, mi- wasn't I a good son? Did I not do enough? But reality is has nothing to do with me. So when it comes to parenting, I learned that, our tough times, it can be a struggle, but for our kids, they see us as that that rock, right? That person that never fails. But reality is we all struggle. And so when I talk to my daughter, I tell her like, yeah, we have tough times. It's okay. Life's not fair, but as long as you keep going, pushing that extra step, that's what matters. So from that childhood to the military, I learned that in the relationships I had, my marriage, for instance, I mentioned in my book,
Yeah.
I was, as a male, you always worried about being the provider, right? Providing the bills, make sure, they're fed, make sure they're clothed, they have food to eat. But there's also a part that we don't see, which is the emotional impact that we can give as well. So I was providing the physical, but I wasn't providing the emotional part. So I think that's a big part of when we grow. We have to look at the things we do good, the things we do bad, but also things we don't do.
Sure.
That don't do part is a crucial part of just in your relationship in general. Is just learning like, yeah, you did things that are like good, you were supposed to, but also things that you didn't do, right? Maybe because you didn't know how, or maybe
Sure.
you're just lack of self awareness, or just, it's just you weren't aware at the time.
Has your family checked out the book?
Of course. I gave them personal copies like right when I got it, and my sisters cried. Um, I had family members cry. I had coworkers cry because they see a part of me they never really saw, because I was very just like a very introverted person. That's who I am naturally.
Sure.
So I never really share that. So when I share that, they basically just, it hit them like an overwhelming force, because like, yeah, he's always done this because that's who he is. But now you see the deep stuff that he never really shared, and now he shares. So for them, it was pretty overwhelming, but it's more an eye-opening an experience for them as well.
And the thing I have to give you credit for too is just having the courage to self-publish the book, to be vulnerable. There's so many military members who go, man, like we've seen crazy shit, and they're like, I should write a book. I should put this out there. And I have friends who were like that. Some of them are no longer with us. I mean, like Drew Dwyer, who we mentioned on the show all the time, former CIA, former Marine. He saw all different types of stuff. And I remember he talked about writing a book and he just never did it. And I think some guys are waiting around for a publisher to approach them to get some kind of book deal. And yeah, I think you got to just have that motivation to do it yourself. So, what did motivate you, and also what would you say to guys who do have a story in them and they just never put that pen to paper?
So I think the big thing for me is when I wrote my book. So I wrote my book fairly recently. It was in December when I actually wrote it, beginning of December. So it's probably what, 2 months ago, give or
Yes,
take.
it's a quick, yeah.
Yeah, so it's very quick. Like I'm not an author. I didn't really like
You
plan
are an
how.
author though. You put this out, man.
Yeah, but now I am. But like before, I didn't see myself as an author. I just like did it. So what happened was, so I give context of how I wrote my book, and people, when I explain that, they understand like how I wrote my book. So at this time, I was going through just like a lot of pain, right? In December timeframe, it was more overwhelming. It's just it's a typical guy. You bury things, right? Whatever with all the troubled times you have in your life, you bury it, but eventually it's gonna come up. So I was just bearing pain, and I remember I was sitting at my desk, working on maybe some emails or something late at night or so. So as a typical guy, like I've done like anything to numb this pain. I've done alcohol. I sent in my book. I've done sleeping pills. I've done that. So what a lot of people do is they work out, right? If you can,
Absolutely. Yeah.
if you can sweat it out, it's gone. So I was I remember this night very vividly. So I was working. I was just like in this pain. So I was like, I'm just gonna work out. It's late at night. It was storming. It was raining. Like in my backyard, it has like a metal awning, so you have like that tink tink noise that hit
Yeah.
rain off the metal type noise. So I was working out and just it just something just told me just to walk out. Right. So I walked down in the rain. And I just knelt, like fell to my knees and just screamed, just tell me my purpose. And at that point, I felt like life was just kicking me on the ground. Like I've lost so much. I've been through so much pain that, that's where I felt. But when I screamed that, I felt this fire that I've never felt before. Like, mind you, like I've been through 5 years overseas. Like I've been through some tough stuff, but I felt this fire I've never felt before. So I got up and, screamed like after everything I've been through, after everything I've lost, after every woman I've loved left, you can't beat me. And in the distance, lightning went off. Like I can see the flash. It wasn't like crazy, like a flash, but it was a flash I noticed, sort of majestic, I guess you would say. So I went in, tried myself off, grabbed the bottle of whiskey, and I wrote my book for 2 days. And so what I mentioned is just like through that, like I was never a book writer, an author. I just did it through pain. So my recommendation is for anybody that's going through some type of pain, write it down. Like when you write things down, you don't have to share it. You can write it down and burn it. Doesn't matter. But when you write it down, it no longer holds a power over you. You realize that the pain you're going through, you see it from a different perspective, right? You write it down and you see, this is what I did, but what didn't I do? Or maybe what's the bad I did? But you no longer hold that purpose in your mind. So I encourage everybody just to write it down. It's hard. I had the bottle of whiskey because it was hard.
Hmm.
I was bawling my eyes out for 2 days, but when you get over that and you realize the pain and you realize that you feel the emotions going through those tough times, that's when you realize the lesson is teaching you, but also at the same time, you're realizing that when you focus on that, it doesn't have power no more. And you can learn from
Did
that.
did you did you journal or anything like that prior to writing the book, or was it like it all just came out at once in those 2 days?
I've never journaled.
Wow.
So I've never journaled at all. I really just did it. So it was 2 days. Like when I mentioned, it felt like 100 therapy sessions in 2 days.
Yeah, you had something you needed to release.
Exactly. So it was very overwhelming. So like a good friend of mine, a brother, brother to me now, I met with him in November, and he said, "I see greatness in you. You're a risk taker." So when I was doing my book, I repeated that. When times got tough, I repeated that what he said, and I kept going. And so like when it comes to like journaling, I've never done that. So I can't really say people that have, but for me, it was just like a very, just overwhelming, just like a 2 day experience. It's like, it's hard to explain, I guess you would say.
Well, what was it you were specifically going in through December that made it like an extremely troubling time?
So for me, it was, in my book, I mentioned my, Lola, my shooting star, right? So we broke up recently before that. And it was just like, she was the one that was like the one that I thought was the one, right? And it didn't work out. So to me, I was just trying to like bury everything. So when I realized, the pain that I was going through that, but also the pain that I was going through life in general, I would always bury things. That's just how I am. I bury things like if I bury it enough, it doesn't exist. I don't have to worry about it. And it just hit me, right? So I was trying to like get over, the small things, but eventually small things become big things if you don't face it. So for me, it's just that time I just basically just faced it all. I was like, if I'm gonna face this, I'm gonna face everything entirely. So that was the big catalyst in December.
And what is the main thing you want the readers to get out of this? Because, as I said, this is definitely not a book for just look. Our audience loves those books, whether it's Chris Peranto's book or Nick Irving or Rob O'Neill, Chris Kyle. They love the military nonfiction books. That's their thing. This is not necessarily one of those books. As you said, it's not like detailed combat stories. It is a book from a veteran author, from an active duty military author. But it's reflective, much like Chris's book. There's definitely more to the story than just your military career. So, yeah, I mean, who is your audience? What do you want them to get out of it?
So I think the big thing with my audience is very general, right? So, I speak from a combat perspective. I have a lot of combat experience. I'm a father, but I think it's not necessarily tailored to just the military audience or the father audience, but also this as well as a mother audience is anybody that deals with pain, right? We all feel pain, and the big part of that is pain can only do so much, right? People don't want to address pain because it hurts. Like who wants to who wants to hurt? But when you realize that pain is a teacher, what is it teaching you? That's when you shift your perspective on pain entirely, right? So my audience is very general. It's not just mothers or not just fathers and veterans, but it's also mothers, sisters, parents. It's basically everybody entirely because we all feel pain. So my big thing is for my audience, it's pain as a teacher. Was it teaching you? You don't feel confined to who I am, as an individual, but also look at who you are and see pain from a different perspective, right? I think that's a big thing for me. I try to instill on my audience. It's, we all feel pain of some sort, but if you look at things from a different perspective, that's when you can actually grow, right? Think about it. So, when we're so the good times, it teaches us a good lesson. You learn, it's easy, right? But the bad times, if you're able to shift your perspective and learn from that, you're unbroken. You
Yeah.
can't be beat. You got good and bad, and you're learning from both. Like, come on, man. Like, you can't be beat.
And you tend to learn more from the bad times.
Exactly. So, a big thing for me, I always tell people, right? So, when I ask them, the tough times in their childhood or maybe adulthood, or whatever the case is, like, how many times did your parents yell at you? Or how many times did your parents tell you good things, right? They loved you, that you're a good child, or you're a good spouse, or whatever the case is. You probably can't count those on your hands. It's a lot. But I guarantee you, you can count how many times your parents yell at you or they hit you. You can remember those. It's what we do in good times matters, but what we do in bad times matters the most.
Yeah, it
You remember
definitely
those.
defines you because I'm sure you've seen it. We see people during bad times really go down the rabbit hole of dark paths. That's when people you see become alcoholics, become reliant on drugs, and just have all these vices to numb them, or they climb out of it through doing something positive.
Exactly. When you look at it, it's just, like, well, my parents divorced or, my spouse left me, I'm going to drink or I'm going to be angry because of that. You remember those times, but you don't remember the times where they told you they loved you or they hugged you or they told you you're a good son or a good husband or wife or whatever the case is. You don't really remember those as much. But when they're hard on you, that's when you remember things. So that's where, my book, I try to instill on people like, yeah, times are tough, pain hurts, but you're not broken. You just got to learn from it.
Absolutely, man. So what's next for you? I mean, you're still active duty. What's on the horizon?
So for me, I got out of the military probably a while back. So
Oh,
I
you
was
did?
yeah. So I got
Because I thought
active.
you were current active duty.
No, so I basically,
Oh, okay.
yeah, so I did the 4 years, right? I did my deployments, and then I went to National Guard where I did my additional deployment I went to Cuba, Guantanamo Bay, I did deployment there,
Mm,
and then I went private contracting. So I did 3 years as a private contractor in Afghanistan. So for me now, it's just helping as many people as I can. And so the next thing for me is I'll probably release a journal. So in my book, I throw those reflective pauses and those questions. So what I want to do is basically have a journal where I throw those questions, but I give you the readers a, a place to write like exactly what's going on with those questions. Now I'm actually launching a clothing brand probably within a couple months or so. I'm working on that now.
nice.
But I just got introduced to speak at a military youth academy,
Very cool.
which it was very shocking. I guess you would say, because I would think like 100 people, I get it. Like I can handle that, not a problem. But when they tell me, okay, it's 500 people, it's middle school kids and it's high school kids as well as adults, I'm like, damn, that's a lot.
Did it go
Um,
over well, or?
oh, so I think I have that I think it's March or April when I'm
Okay,
doing
so it's
that.
coming up. It's coming. Okay.
Yeah, so it's coming up. So I'm just preparing for that. But for me, it's very like overwhelming.
See, if Chris
Um,
was on this podcast, he'd be able to tell you how to handle that because he's
it,
done thousands of people many times. So,
yeah, it definitely like it's really for me, it's new. Like I said, I barely just started doing this like end of December when my book came out publicly on Amazon. It's like December 26th, if I'm not mistaken. So like all this is like very fairly new to me. So I have those things going on. My speaking events, I speak with just not just military, but also just women of domestic violence, children. It's just everybody, anybody and everybody really. So just trying to tell them like, pain sucks, but try to learn from it. You'll grow. You have to address those hard times to be better as an individual and learn from that.
all right. So now that I know you have experience at Gitmo, you are probably the person to ask since it's back in the news. What do you think of this whole idea of them sending illegal immigrants who are like involved in the worst of crimes over to Guantanamo? Any thoughts on it?
Uh, it's interesting. So when I was there, so a lot of people don't understand. Like, so when I went there the first time, I was thinking like Havana, right? I watched like Bad Boys 2. I'm thinking like the whole Havana experience. Like, I was like, hell yeah, right? But when you get there, it's not really like that. So you have like the Navy side, you have the Army side. The Navy side, they're stationed there. That's like their deployment type thing. For them, they're stationed there. The Army side is a little different because you handle the prisons and stuff like that. So for me, it's I don't know. To be honest with you, like if that works, that works. I don't really have like a personal opinion if that's like a good thing or bad thing. But I think that when you deal with the worst, you have to handle that accordingly, I guess you would say. So like if you get most release for that, like I'm all about it. I think that's a big thing when you go to just criminals in general. I think it comes down to just protecting who we are, right? I'm a dad and I worry about my kid. I'm an uncle and brother. I worry about my nieces and nephews and stuff
Sure.
like that. As long as they're protected, send them wherever you want to. I don't care.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, man. So you're not on social media really. I was looking, right?
Yeah, so for me, it's really so I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn. That's pretty
Okay.
much it. That's the big platforms I'm on. I made my Facebook probably about January timeframe. So I go to context to why I made my Facebook. So I was never a big fan of social media in general.
I mean, clearly, yeah.
Yeah, so the reason behind it when I was contracting overseas, uh, in my 17 to 22 uh, era when I was contracting. So, my name, Juan Espinoza, is fairly common in California.
Yes.
That's super, super common, right?
Yeah.
So, I was working with some Afghan locals. When you work with them, you understand like Taliban's like a big part of them, right? They try to gain type of information. So I remember I didn't have a beard on my social media at the time, on my old social Facebook. And, he was like, hey, what's your name? I was like, I'm Juan, what's your last name? Espinoza, we're fairly common. We interacted fairly regularly, I guess you would say. So I told him that. And it was a week later, he said, are you Juan Espinoza? You had a picture, you didn't have a beard, but you had your daughter in the picture. I was like, no, that's not me. Like, that's crazy. Like, no, that's not me. But reality, it was. So that scared the crap out of me. So I basically deleted all social media from that point on because knowing if this person that has connections, maybe with some people that you don't want to have connections with,
Yeah.
if they're able to find me on that, that I don't want to know like what else they're able to find. So basically, I deleted all my social media from that point on until probably this year. That's when I actually started introducing. I'm like, well, I'm good now.
Yeah,
Like
well, I mean, it's crazy with facial recognition technology, which is going to be in the hands of everyone. You're going to be able to find anyone pretty damn easily, find baby pictures of them, find, especially because if kids born now, they're on the internet from the moment of birth until whenever, because their parents are posting pictures of the baby photos and then them growing up, and facial recognition technology is able to know that that's all the same person. It's pretty scary stuff. Um, yeah, there's pluses and minuses, I will say, with the whole social media thing, because for one, it does become a huge time suck. At the same time, it's like you're promoting a book. It is good to have for those reasons. So there's positives and negatives. I'll say the majority of the authors we have on, they're on all of it. They're on Twitter, they're on Instagram, and like I get it. We are for the show. We're on all of those. I mean, I'm not the biggest social media person either, surprisingly, maybe because I do the podcast and all that. But like to me, this is very different. I like having one-on-one conversations with people. And to me, all of these apps are just designed to keep us on as long as possible. And you could be writing a book. You could be doing something much more valuable with your time. Could be working out, as you spoke about.
exactly. I think that's a big thing. So when I tell people like why I didn't have social media, because I know social media, you have to market yourself, right?
Yeah.
Being a new author that no one knows about me. So trying to like work on that. But when I basically tell them the context of why I didn't have social media, they understand like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. So, I'm getting more into that social media now. But the reason why I didn't was, why I told you. So I think that's a big thing is as being like a new author that no one knows about you, they don't know who you are, where you stand. You have to have that. It's like the pros and cons, right? Like I'm not a huge social media guy. It's just not me. Like LinkedIn is probably my biggest one I had probably by 13 years or so, give or take. So getting into that realm of social media, it's like you pick your poison, what you want.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So then the easiest way for people to find you, of course, is juanespinoza.me, and then just going on Amazon, picking up the book Unbroken, Turning Pain into Purpose, my story, which is up now. Highly recommend that you guys pick it up. As we said earlier, it's a quick read. So it is the type of thing you can read in a couple of days. And it's the type of thing you'll read and kind of reflect upon your own life and how you could relate to Juan. But yeah, man, great talk with you. And listen to Pantera Unbroken, because that's your song now.
I'm gonna have to listen to it. Literally,
It's
probably
heavy. It's fucking heavy, man.
when we get off, I'm probably gonna listen to it. Like I'm a big rock. I listen to all kinds of music. It could
Yeah,
be
same here.
the gospel. It could be the metal. I'm very big on like metal EDM. Stuff like that. So I'm definitely gonna have to listen to it after we get off this podcast because I'm very
It's your,
curious.
like I said, man, it's your book. So you have a connection to it now. I think just hearing that word, anyone who's a Pantera fan, that's what they'll think of is that song. It's immediately what I thought of.
Exactly. And I think that's a big part of just who you relate to, right? So like
Yeah.
with my book, it's not necessarily just a military guy speaking, his combat experience. Like I don't throw a lot of that in there. I just want to give
No,
people more of a context. But it goes to just general, right? It could be brothers, sons, mothers, sisters, wives, husbands, basically anybody really. So I was on a podcast last week actually, and it was so the first podcast I was on, it was this I was the first male guest on her podcast, and that podcast is killing it. It literally has the
nice.
most views on the entire platform in general.
Oh
The one
yeah.
I was on last week, it was two female hosts. They're older in age, um, but she said she was like I think she was pushing on 60 or so. She was like, I wish I had this advice or this book when I was younger because it helped me more because I can see the good and the bad, but also the lessons that you learned. And then they basically go on to where it's like, well, you're 33, which they thought they were shocked I was 33. I was like, because you how much experience you have now. I was like, I learned.
Yeah.
But I think the big thing is, when I speak to the audience, is like, if you guys have any issues or just want to talk to somebody, like my website's a big platform I use. I have a contact form. Always just send me an email or go through that contact form. You come to me directly and we'll set up a time to talk and we'll just talk, you know?
That's awesome, man. And while you're still at the level you are, you could do that. If it takes off, that's going to be harder to do. But for now, that's cool that you still have that availability.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing is I'll try to handle everything directly because I know it's hard to open up to somebody when you really don't know a lot about them, right? You're not gonna like my therapist, for instance, right? She told me, "What's your pain? I don't know anything about you. Why would I open up to you?" But for me, it's you have my book. Like
Yeah.
it's the good, the bad, not the easy stuff. So you know about me. So for people to be vulnerable, I think that's a big part of just establishing that trust. So I'll do it as long as I can. That's my purpose. I've learned that the hard way, and I think that's you know, a beauty of it is just trying to help as many people as I can. Life is short, so I'll do as help as many people as I can with the time I have left.
Awesome. That's what it's all about, man. I think that's a good way to end it. Pick up the book, Unbroken. Great speaking with you, Juan. I'm glad you reached out to me, man.
Awesome, appreciate it. This was definitely a very awesome experience. So like I like to connect with my hosts later on. Just like, how's it going on? I like to do. I'm more of an in-person type person. Like,
So, oh, same here. But you're where? Are you still in California?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
So if you
where
were
you
in New
at?
York, we could do it in studio. But if you're ever
Hey,
here again, we'll do it. So
yeah, definitely. Like, so we'll do something in the future for sure. Like, we'll go in person. We'll talk. To me, that's more meaningful when you
oh,
actually talk in
absolutely.
person.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
We'll do it at
So
some point, man. But this was great as it is, and next time maybe with Chris or something. I know we have a lot planned for the rest of the year, but sometime down the line, possibly. And thanks, man. Thanks for doing this.
awesome. Appreciate being here.
That's all for this episode of Battleline Podcast. But we're always posting new content on social media. Follow us on Instagram at Battleline Podcast and on Twitter at Battleline Pod. That's an order. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes up every Tuesday. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast platform of choice. Believe in yourself. Face all challenges head on. And as always, never quit.